Well, being 7:30, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. And I'm going to take things out of order a little bit and have Shelley Newhouse come up and speak about COVID in the town. How you doing, Shelley?
Okay, how are you guys?
Good.
I just left my booster clinic. Came here. It's a good turnout, which is nice.
That's
It's
good.
awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
So it was good. I'm drowning in COVID. I don't know how else to put it. I can just put it just like that. Just so much. I mean, I don't know if you guys got the memo.
Yeah.
As of today, I'm up to 239
Oh,
cases.
Wow.
We're at a 7% positivity rate, which is the highest we've ever been. And I have a lot of people in the hospital that are unvaccinated. And it's just a lot of still trudging through. Not really sure yet if we have any of the Omicron variant. They're just starting now to type it out in the lab, so I'm sure that, like the Delta variant, there will just be assumed probably that that's what will be here. So, case investigation and contact tracing is overwhelming, but we're managing. I have a lot of good people that are helping out, that have been helping me throughout this whole process these last 20 months. So and I'm hoping to continue to keep them on. I think we're going to have we're in a winter surge, but I hope it doesn't get worse, but who's to know? And we're the same as every other community. We're no different than anyone else. We all have really high numbers, no different, maybe other than the bigger communities like Lawrence and Lowell who have really high numbers. We're pretty much in line with all of our surrounding communities. So it's been crazy, but hopefully with vaccinations and we can really put this to rest. I hope, this coming spring when we can get back outdoors again, which would be nice.
You seeing an age group that's higher than?
Right now, our highest age groups are the elementary schools, so middle school and under.
Wow.
So I feel like it went through the high school, and now it's in the elementary schools. So that's where we're at. And with that, when you get the elementary school age kids, you get their parents who are getting it, and then their grandparents. They all live together. So it's a lot of households, sports teams, any kind of a youth organization like cheerleading or gymnastics. Or I think we're really high this week too because we had a Thanksgiving, the holiday, so we're getting all the cases from Thanksgiving, people traveling, and that's probably going to happen again. A lot of people are testing for Christmas,
Yeah.
and then we'll see a little bit of a surge after the Christmas break and holiday from people traveling again and going away and getting together with their families. So I'm curious to see what like January will bring with numbers if we trend down. But a lot of interest in the booster shots, which is nice. A lot of people are looking. It's hard to get an appointment. They're booking a few weeks out. So we had a clinic today. Hoping to have another clinic next Thursday again.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
What about breakthrough cases? Are you seeing an increase?
Tons. So I have, we're at like 239. I'm at like almost half are breakthrough cases. And I have 6 triple vaccinated breakthrough cases,
Oh, wow.
Wow.
which is,
Any of those hospitalized?
no, very
Okay.
mild illness. And most of them are sick for like 2 to 3 days. And that's it. And then by the time I call them, they're like, oh, I feel fine. I feel great. So it's that, which shows, the vaccinations are working. That's what they're not meant to eradicate COVID and get rid of it, and just reduces your risk significantly of getting COVID. And if you do get COVID, you don't get as sick.
Do we have any idea of the percentage of Wilmington residents that are vaccinated?
I do that. So that data actually comes out on Thursdays. So I just have last week's data, and we were at 64% of those that are eligible.
Right.
So it's obviously higher in some age groups. So, but total population we're at around 64. I bet you we bumped up pretty good over the last week, because I've been seeing it every week. We've been trending, a point or two higher, which is nice.
Good.
Just because of people thinking about the boosters and then thinking maybe I should just get vaccinated. So, and that's fully vaccinated. So we're pretty high with, we're over 70% partially vaccinated, but some people don't get the second one. You just don't know. So we have to go by the numbers for fully vaccinated.
If someone gets one of the at-home kits and tests themselves, test positive, are they then supposed to contact you to let you know?
They're supposed to, but
Okay.
they don't. I mean,
Yeah.
they're so prevalent out there now, the at-home
Yeah.
kits, because really when you have an at-home test, I want you to go get a PCR. I want you to follow up with that. Even if it comes back positive or negative, you really should go get that PCR. But some people want to know, like right now, I don't feel good, I want to know. And then they say, oh, it's negative, I'm great, I can do what I want tomorrow. But you really should still stay home and go get that that confirmed PCR, either way. So today, I do send some people up to, the state still has, they're called Project Beacon sites where you can go drive through and get tested. And they have them at Suffolk Downs, there's one in Lynn, there's one right up here in Lowell. And it was a 3-hour wait today to get tested. Whereas, earlier, I went and got tested before a small little trip and I drove right in and out in like 10 minutes. So today was a 3-hour wait.
Isn't Mass General doing it in Danvers as well?
Yes, they just started.
Yeah.
That hasn't been heavily advertised. I didn't even know about it, and someone had told me about it. And usually we know about, all the local boards of health know where all these sites are. But the governor just stood that site back up again, which is good, because starting on December 1st, a lot of these sites were going to shut down, and you were just kind of going to be on your own to go find a test. But they, Massachusetts is such a high, and we're in a surge in the whole Northeast. I mean, if you look at New Hampshire, it's like the highest COVID rates in the country.
Yeah.
So we really need to keep these sites open and push vaccinations and push testing. It's so important to stay home if you're sick. Even if you think you have a cold, right now I would suggest you stay home and get tested until you get your test results back. And then if it's a cold, you let that kind of subside for a day or two and then you're okay. But COVID lingers for a good solid 10 days. So I'm really hoping to make sure that I can keep my nurses come the first of the year after this CARES Act money dries up.
And that was the reason that, certainly one of the reasons that I thought it would be appropriate to have Shelley talk to the committee tonight, obviously to provide this update, but there is the possibility that there would be a need to come back to the Finance Committee later in the year for a transfer. As it is right now, we are, as Shelley noted, using the remaining funds from the CARES Act, so that money had to be obligated by the end of October. And of course, at that point, we weren't in the surge mode that we are right now, and so I think Shelley and Brian made a best guesstimate as to what would be needed in terms of money for contact tracing folks, and I believe the number we have is something in the order of $16,400 that's remaining to be drawn down before the end of the calendar year. So then, in addition to that, when we receive the ARPA money, there's $50,000 designated, from the ARPA fund, with the intent being to make it available to Shelley and her folks and the schools to the extent that they need it as well.
We've been really working too with the schools. We've just 7 days a week, all day long, constant communication with the school nurse leader, myself. We have like this little text chain. It's just because where the schools have been hit so hard, it's just been an ongoing contact tracing COVID case investigation with them. So they're feeling my pain as well.
They're doing their own contact tracing?
Yeah, yep. And we kind of work together, but for the majority, they're doing, most of it. A lot of times we help out on the other side. They've got grandparents or they're in an organization outside of school, like a club or something. So, but it's really just a good flow of communication between us, trying to make sure that we capture that one positive that who's affecting, you know, a whole number of people.
Anything else for Shelley, or?
Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Shelley.
Sure.
You know, and I speak for myself, and
Yeah.
you know, it's whatever you need.
Yeah.
Financially, I think everybody will support that.
Yeah.
You know.
Great. I'm
Yeah.
stressed out about it. I don't want to be stressed out now.
Don't be stressed
I
out
was gonna
about
say,
it.
don't be stressed.
No, don't.
Don't be
We
stressed.
appreciate all your hard
Yeah.
work.
Thank you.
Because this is a lot of hard work, yeah.
Yeah. It's been okay. I was lucky. You know, Jeff and Carrie and Glenn, everyone, it's been really supportive. I think of each other, and we all have been of each other, so it's been good,
It's
which is
great.
nice.
Don't let the financial part worry you.
No.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
keep doing what you need to do.
All right.
Yeah, because we got the reserve fund,
Yeah.
you know, we can make an appropriation.
If anyone has any questions about COVID, like really, you can call me anytime. I'm serious. Like people call me all the time. I don't mind. They're like, I'm sorry. I'm like, no, you can call me because I'd rather them know than think about, oh my God, should I go to work? What should I do? Like,
Right.
you just don't know. You can find me, find my number and call me.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thanks.
Next, Dr. Brand. Mr. Ruggiero, come on down, come on down. Come on down.
He doesn't know when they broke up so quick.
Good evening, everyone.
Not to go off the subject too much, but just to piggyback on
Sure.
Shelley's. You guys did the COVID vaccinations through, was it Cataldo?
We did.
How did that work out?
We had some bumps in the road with that. They are, and I'm not sure exactly as to why all that was. I think that there was a staffing issue with that. They staffed those clinics completely. We are doing a follow-up with Cataldo, but we're also pursuing another vendor, if you will, or agency to provide another one in January. So
Okay,
I think there were 300, if I remember correctly, 300 appointments respectively for the first clinic, and that will be repeated for the next one. And then I think they're also looking to expand it. I think it's by 100
Okay.
for the follow-up clinics. So, but yeah.
now they also giving out the booster as well?
I don't think that there are any plans right now in
Okay.
play for organizing that at this point in time, but I'm sure that as we get into the new year, that will be something we'll explore.
Okay.
I'll just take the opportunity, if I could, to thank Shelley. I know she left, but
Sure.
she has been a terrific partner for us and with us as the communication is on a much more daily basis with her and Becky Brown, who's our interim coordinator. But it has been a lot, certainly from the town level and certainly in the school level. But we appreciate her partnership and the positive communication and collaboration that I know unfolds daily. I'm not privy to all of it, but I know that there's a constant and open line of communication. So
That's good.
we're very fortunate for her partnership.
That's good. And the first thing we're gonna do is go over the current school budget and how you're doing with that.
So I'll certainly let Paul speak to it if I forget something. We're in the process exactly where we have laid out in terms of our plan for for assembling that budget. It's obviously always rather challenging at this point in the year, somewhat early, but it's we're on point, if you will, in terms of the general budget calendar that has certainly since my time, this is the fourth budget cycle. We're following that schedule next week. Next Wednesday, the next school committee meeting will be the first pass and presentation of that budget plan for fiscal year 23. And in the middle of January, I think it's January 19th is slated to be the more complete or holistic budget presentation as we get a little bit deeper into some of the challenges that we see and face at this point in time, and some of the things that we're planning for next fiscal year. So, anything you want to add?
No, I think in the packet that I had sent, it kind of tried to outline a little bit the process we go through. So, December 15th, Glenn will present the preliminary budget to the school committee. And as we've done every year, it's preliminary.
Yeah.
And then we meet with the town manager and his staff, I think that Friday actually, to come up with a number, if you will, and just to talk it through. And then we have to go back and kind of, if we have to adjust the budget, we'll adjust the budget at that time, and Glenn will present it to the school committee's recommended budget in a village, or before Jeff's budget message.
Yeah. Any questions so far from the committee?
No.
What, in the current budget, how are the revolving accounts and, you know, the CARES and all that stuff? 'Cause we had some rather high balances a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so they, in the packet of information, there was a revolving account report, so at the end of '21, the balances have gone down quite a bit, especially CARES. I know at one point we were over $1 million. And then we ended FY '20 at about $694,000.
Okay.
And at the end of '21 at $490. So obviously, you know, the issues we had in March of '20, we didn't have an April school vacation week program, nor did we have a summer program. For that fiscal year, we didn't lay off or furlough anyone. They did some work, it was preparing and so forth, but we purposely did not do that. Going into '21, that group they hire each year for the most part. So in '21, the staffing was way down because we were only running, I think 4 schools ran a program for the beginning of the year, then we went hybrid. We got a full day program on Wednesdays and a couple of, and then 4 days, like afternoon type programs. So we kind of modified it, did what we had to do as far as that goes. So, so we have a 490 balance to cover operating expenses. So we're able to run, and this year it's not back to where it was, but it's much better as far as enrollments. But in the families, as you know, just love the program.
Yeah.
Food service is the federal government made a decision that everyone was free and reduced lunch, free lunch essentially. So we made the funds came in pretty nice as far as that goes. Plus that group, Fed, I think, created or gave out over 400,000 meals to community members from March 20 through most of this early part of 21. So we had to drop off or pick up, if you will, at the high school. So that was really nice.
Question for that, and that, in going by the high school and that was active, there was only one time there was a police officer directing traffic.
Yeah.
That kind of screwed up the traffic pattern a little.
Yeah, well, it kind of took us by surprise a few times too. I mean, I looked out the window and said, oh my God, look at the traffic backed up on Church Street. It's like crazy. So we had the police out there at that time, but that was just because it was a mess that particular day anyway. The traffic back, almost back down to the public safety building. And, it was crazy, but we tried to manage it the best we can. But it's tough even coming off of Adam Street into the school. So. And it did catch us by surprise, a number of people that took advantage of it, which is great.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Just a little more traffic control.
Do you have to refund any of this money if you don't use it?
So some of the CARES families had paid, so we gave them the option of either refund or credit. So most took credit. This was more in 20, like the last couple of months in FY '20, April, May, and June for the most part. So most of the families chose to take a credit for 21. So that's what we did. And we did refund a little bit of funds. We have a preschool, integrated preschool program where general education students who participate is tuition-based. So we had to refund some of those students when we couldn't run the program on those families. So we took care of all that.
The school personnel, contractual and non-contractual, Are the contracts all settled, or?
No, so our teacher contract expired at the end of August 31st of '21.
Okay.
So they do not have a contract this year. We're still negotiating with them. The nurses expired at the same time. And we're still negotiating with them. So both those groups are working without a contract this year. This year, for administrative assistants and educational assistants contracts expire. So we essentially have 4 contracts we'll be negotiating, trying to negotiate this year. A cafeteria association, we didn't negotiate that and settle that, so I think that goes up to 25 or 26.
Okay. Also on the students, you know, it seems that the population's gone down, and yet the personnel hasn't.
So it's something that, yeah, I'm gonna start. It's certainly, it's something that we are watching closely. It's something that certainly as the last couple of years have unfolded, you know, the decline in populations, and this is not a comment about COVID, it's just more broadly speaking, although COVID was certainly has impacted, as we understand it, many districts, not just ours, but it is a storyline across, unfortunately, the Commonwealth and beyond in terms of the loss of students who did not return to public education settings. There's in particular, you know, the reality for us is there are a couple of things I think that are important to note. At the elementary level, it certainly is. I came to learn the approach that Paul and my predecessors take. It's an adjustment that's made on an annual basis to really, and it's part of the budget process, so there's some predictions at play in terms of what exactly the population might be, you know, many months down the road. For the most part, you know, that there's a pretty solid basis to make those predictions, and that usually plays out, and it usually has allowed us historically to shape the pupil-teacher ratio, or the staffing rather, around the pupil-teacher ratio. The secondary level is a far more complicated system, if you will, or organizations to adjust to. And I can expand a little bit on that if you like. At the middle school level, as I'm sure many of you know, that's structured around teaching teams. And those teams have a definitive number of staff that are part of those teams teaching those respective subjects. And to my knowledge, there's not been, for quite some time anyway, an adjustment to those teams or that model as a whole. At the secondary level, at the high school level, there have been a couple of adjustments there. But it is true, and as I've come to learn, it is true that the enrollment there in particular has gone down fairly significantly if you take it at a 10-year trend, a 10-year look back rather.
Yeah.
And it is part of right now, which perhaps you've seen in the packet, where and I'm trying to take a very closer look at in terms of taking a look at that program of studies. How do we as a high school, as a community, compare from what we're offering programmatically to other districts before we start to reshape what that staffing looks like? So that's and the other thing I think worthy to note is that we here, which is not unlike many other districts that I'm aware of, is we keep full-time equivalent teachers, that is to say whole teachers, 1.0 as we refer to them as opposed to part-time teachers, a 0.6 for example, or 0.8. I do know that some school systems do take that approach, but I also know that can be difficult sometimes to attract and retain, you know, folks that are interested in a 0.6 position. It's not that it's impossible, but it sometimes is a factor. But we are, and hopefully that's come through from, again, if you had a chance to look at the materials. I know that it's incumbent upon me to holistically take a look at what this enrollment looks like and how that maps along staffing, because there haven't been sort of more whole-scale adjustments of the staffing at the secondary level, and that we're in the process of taking a closer look at it. We've for planning for fiscal year 23, we've based upon the data and the information we have before us, we've made those adjustments at the elementary level. We are looking right now to where it is that we might be able to make some adjustments at the secondary level. The other thing that I think is worth to note, that how is our staffing levels mapped, if you will, or tracked alongside enrollment, is the reality that the complexity of student needs in many cases has grown. Our efforts, which is a good thing as a district, to try and lower the number of students we have in out-of-district placements has dropped, if you will, favorably over the last, I forget the exact numbers, so I'm not going to throw those out here, but I definitely know that it has gone in a favorable direction, if you will, from we have about 50, I think it is, students right now, or thereabouts in out-of-district placements. We were up as high in the 70s, maybe coming close to 80, maybe 5-ish years ago, maybe a few more. So there's a lot of efforts that have been at play. My point is to try and keep as many students as we can in district. Sometimes, though, those needs come absolutely with the need for additional educational assistance. If you were to take a look, and I don't think it's particularly in this material that we have here, but I remember well taking a look at the high school as an example. If you were to take a look at the educational assistance, that number over 10, 12 years has absolutely increased. I suspect that we would find that similarly probably throughout the system, the school system as a whole. At the end of the day, those are all obviously FTE counts, they're staffing counts, so that number goes up. And sometimes it's not easy to discern or understand exactly why, but that's part of it, for sure.
If I could just what Glenn said, just so you know the process we go through at an elementary level. So with there's contractual language as well that pre-K to grade 3, 1 to 20, one teacher to 20 students. Grade 4 to 8, it's 1 to 25. And high school goes back to 1 to 20. So we have to work within those parameters as well. So on the elementary side, we actually will take, for instance, the FY22 enrollment numbers by school, and we'll move them a year. And then we'll see, based on the number of teachers by grade, what does that look like? And we'll actually, say, okay, we have to move a teacher from first grade to second grade because it's 1 to 15 in first grade. And if we move one, it's 1 to 19 type thing. So we do that. So we'll move that, or we'll say, okay, we have to reduce a teacher in grade 3 in this school. In this other school, the same thing. So we deal with that really for Shawshene, Woburn Street, North and West. So we do that each year. So the numbers bounce around in those schools. Glenn mentioned high school and middle school, just a little different animal. We're cognizant of that. And I think in the package, Glenn has 2 projects going on. One looking at the whole middle school, the team concept versus something else. What's the right thing to do in the middle school? What does that mean? Staffing level. In the high school, looking at the program of studies, we given, is the high school program what kids want today versus what they might have wanted 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So we're looking at that whole thing. The other thing and I hear you completely when you look at the enrollment numbers. Now, me just being a numbers person, I'm asked the same question you are.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we have is, Glenn alluded to it, ed assistants, and he mentioned out-of-district placement. We built a few special ed programs in district that we did not have, probably in the last 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And so we had to add special ed teachers, educational assistants, and so forth. And that helped to reduce the number of out-of-district placements although maybe the number's the same, but we might have had more students going out of district if we didn't have those programs in district. So we built some of those. So some of the, the FTEs, enrollment going down, we're also building a special ed side staffing to do what I just said. Plus with all the social emotional stuff going on and so forth, we're trying to deal with a lot of that to satisfy students' needs and so forth. So.
Now, the educational assistants, do they have a contract then, like the teachers, that they only have so many students?
No,
They don't.
No.
No.
no, the educational assistants, there'll be some that are one-to-one, we call them
Yeah.
one-to-one, which will be, one education
Yeah.
for a student, and then we'll have some just other educational assistants that need to be in the room to watch multiple kids. So, but there's no 1 to 20. So they work with a teacher.
So could I ask, because I've read this packet, and thank you for all this information, but I'm still confused as to what is the plan. Am I just not picking it up correctly in here? How are we going to address this?
So there's a couple of things. So first off, for the high school right now, one of the things that is one of the things that is not easy to do at the high school level is just to reduce when there are retirements. And the reason being for that is, if we are trying to take a holistic look at providing the most robust and expansive program of studies and courses that students may be able to or wish to access, right? The goal of still trying to make sure that it's a place where those students from Wilmington want to go and feel like they can get the best education that is, in line with what their plans are for the future. We need that's a balance between still offering, the robustness of that program. If, just as an example, there were 3 science teachers in one particular year, or 2 science teachers in one particular year that were going to retire, the first thought may be, well, we could reduce those and just not fill those. Balancing that though with what do we still need to try and provide for science programming. So this program review that's underway right now is specific to trying to first make sure we can understand what it is that we may be offering right now that is maybe not of great interest any longer for a good subset of our students. We can see some trend data with that in terms of where where the interest lies. As well, what we're doing is taking a holistic look we're looking at 30 other high schools, I think it is 29 or 30 other high schools, to best understand where it is that we might have gaps or areas for growth to make sure that we can proudly stand behind saying we're offering as good of a programmatic experience as, say, Burlington or whatever other community is, before we just go to the place of saying, okay, we're going to reduce by 10 teachers, let's just say, or 5 teachers, or whatever that number is, or staff as a whole. So to me, what is important first is to understand that, and then back into what is it from a staffing standpoint we need to be able to offer that. There is some imperfect science, though, for sure, behind it, in the sense of also understanding how many students that building is going to serve. And clearly within this data, and as I've fairly prominently talked about with the school committee, and is of concern, is the number of students that are not necessarily making their way from the 8th grade across town to the high school. We don't know those numbers until, really officially until the end of the year. I don't think it's any secret that a fairly significant draw recently of interest for many of our students has been Shawshene Tech, the tech school. They don't find out their admission status until I think it's February or March, I believe, past the budget timeline, of course, essentially. So that's another aspect that's difficult to contend with. And if we are seeing that, if the trend continues of, say, what it is right now, and it's been 80 to 100 students, if that continues, that's going to be that's going to be one thing. If it adjusts itself and let's say is cut in half, that's a whole other thing, obviously, that we're going to have to deal with there. The middle school is different than the high school for sure, and what my intention is there right now is to take a look at what it is that we need to do and can do to restructure that program. I want to make sure that this community wants to still stick with the teaming approach, which has been there for some time, and I think, quite frankly, is how most, I would say, or at least a majority of middle schools are structured. It is something that I believe in, but we also have to figure out what those adjustments can be with the possibility of, say, reducing teams, restructuring the team structure, how many teachers are a part of that. So it's some sort of complicated work at play, but what I anticipate coming out of both of those is to be able to identify staffing adjustments that are going to be possible that balance still the programmatic experience that we're wanting for our students with what falls in line with the ratio, the contract numbers, and make determinations to go forward from there.
To step back just a minute, does anyone from either the high school or the school administration contact the kids that don't go from 8th grade to 9th to find out why?
Yeah, great question. So that was done last year, and it is my full intention to do so this year. I'm not sure prior to that if that has been done. I don't know, all of you know at all, but once we know who those families are, the students, and the families, it is my full intent to reach out to them to try and better understand, perhaps, what part of the rationale may have been, if they're hopeful to share with us to understand that. Because I think that that's going to be important information for us to come to terms
It's like an exit interview.
Indeed, no, it is indeed, very much so, very much so. And
Why aren't you going into the high school?
well, and it's understood that and that's the great thing about the choices that most students and families have in communities like Wilmington, and there is a choice. And I didn't mention private, of course. That's a choice that is out there as well. And those may vary from year to year, those total numbers, but to try and understand that and to make sure that what may be behind anything of that sort is that there's a perception that maybe the high school is not able to offer the best program for them. And I don't know that. We don't know that, but we do need to try and, I think, understand that.
Now, you said that was done, though, the reach out to the parents last year.
Correct.
What
Our
was,
current principal, the principal of the middle school, Dr. Quirk, didn't have a terribly high response rate, unfortunately. So, so she does have a little bit of information along those lines. But I'm going to try and take a more holistic view and tap into, and hopefully we'll get maybe a better response this time.
How many students was the high school built for?
960.
960? Looks like in 10 years we've lost maybe 280 kids.
Probably in that area.
And overall, 980 in 10 years for the total enrollment through the schools. If my math is correct. But
That'd be
so
122 for 10 years, but that's close enough.
so there's a lot of empty space at the high school.
that's a significant amount
Yeah.
of a drop off in a 10-year period.
I guess my frustration is that while I totally appreciate the complexity of a high school curriculum and trying to make changes within it, this is something that the Finance Committee has brought up. This is now our 3rd year. And last year we told, we'll have a plan for you. So it seems like we're a little late to the game in addressing this, since this has been going on for 10 years. Steady decline. And that's what frustrates me, because I know you're a great numbers guy, but to us, those numbers translate into dollars that we have to represent and stand behind. when we bring this budget to town meeting. As with any department, if we're not comfortable, or if there's any kind of uncertainty, it puts us in a very difficult position. So I, for one, am looking at a 10-year decline, a number of years coming up ahead of us of continued decline, and we still don't really have a plan. We're just starting to address it a little bit more aggressively, but there still isn't really a plan. And that's very frustrating to me. And I think it's going to become very frustrating to the taxpayers when we're going to be going to them and asking them for different large capital projects. And not everybody's going to understand how difficult it is to maneuver around a high school environment. And that could be very unwelcoming when you go to look for a new school. And we have a high school that is, a third of it is empty. And as far as, I'm sorry, Marion.
No, go ahead, finish.
I'd be very interested in knowing what parents are thinking. Like, what would compel a parent leaving the middle school to leave the town? That's a pretty big step. I understand if they're going to the tech, because their child is inclined to be in that environment, and that's a wonderful school, and it's a wonderful opportunity for them. So I 100% support children moving into the technical school. But when you've gone to school with kids your whole life, and you're now going into the 9th grade, to make that break, that's a big break. So what would compel a child to want to leave all their friends? You know, I don't know. I don't know any of the answers. First of all, I should say, I don't know any of the answers to anything that I'm raised.
Yeah. No,
So, and I can totally appreciate how difficult this is. This is not an easy problem to solve. It's not an easy problem to even identify what is the problem. There's probably multiple things going on here. And we are still coming out of, hopefully rid of a pandemic.
Yeah.
So obviously that slowed down the process.
That's right.
But as a taxpayer and as a member of this committee, this has to be a very important part of moving forward, is identifying what is going on, what's going on in our middle school that is turning people off. Because we have a beautiful high school, and you can always campaign for classes that you want. Why wouldn't you want to go there? I don't understand it.
If I may, I have that exact same question that absolutely needs to be answered. And again, I very much want to be cautious, and as you were, about the options are great to have for families and for students, and those that deem an alternative, if you will, to the Wilmington High School is one that they think would be better for them. But we do need to understand that there's no obviously fixed number from year to year. There is a fixed number of enrollment that the Shawshene Tech School can take every year, and that, as I understand it, doesn't expand. It's I don't understand all of the complexity of it, but it's a fixed number, and I've had this conversation with Brad Jackson, who's the current superintendent there. What is another factor that's playing into there's 5, as you may know, there's 5 communities that are a part of those districts, and 2 of the member districts have very, very low numbers, leading to the expansion of additional spaces for the other 3 communities that seem to be right now sending quite a few students there, one of which is Wilmington. So that ends up opening up more spots at the current sort of rate or pace right now. But I would very much want to know that same question that you just posed, because again, going back to the if there is some either real or perception of what may be perhaps missing or lacking at the high school, we need to understand that. The one thing that I have come to learn is that for those families and students who do make the journey to the high school, they stay, number one, and number two, they report that they have a terrific experience there.
Do you hold an open house
For
for the high school, like Shawshene?
we
To
For
do-
the eighth
bring,
graders.
to bring in
Yes.
the eighth graders,
Yes.
okay, as a high,
Yes.
you know,
yes.
to promote it.
Yeah, we've had those conversations though to really shift that focus to the promotion aspect.
Yeah.
That we can't nor should we think that we are the only option in town. We know that we're not. And so there has been actually quite a bit of discussion about trying to get ourselves, the high school, you know, and as an example, our athletic director has started to take down some of her coaches and student athletes to provide an overview of the opportunities for them at the high school. Our administrators at the high school are thinking differently and have been around planning communication materials to bring attention for that first time family that maybe doesn't know what the high school can provide. We are in that place, and we are not we're not losing sight of that fact that we want to make sure that people understand that it's an option before them. But if I may, just to go back to the more important point, I completely understand that. I completely understand that this is we need to make some adjustments here. Now, what's going to be, though, I think important to also point out problematic. We were sort of talking earlier about the educational assistance and the programming. Coming out of the pandemic, or we're still obviously in it right now, that is also taking its toll on our students, and we have been fortunate through the grant monies that we've had to be able to bring on board through grant funding some additional supports, and thank goodness, because seemingly from all of the stories and headlines I'm reading around, everybody is struggling with the impact of this ongoing on our young people, and I'm worried about that longer term, as I know many are, and so that sort of all plays into this, that we have to make adjustments where we need to. We have to be still, I think, open to what it is that we need to make sure that we can provide the programming with an attention to the bottom line, and I absolutely do understand it, and I recognize that when you take a look at the overall tally sheet, if you will, staffing and enrollment, they're not aligned, and I think there's some important stories behind some of that, but I also know we need to go further and deeper. So,
Just
Go
to
ahead.
follow up to the tech, I'm sure you understand that when we have 100 kids that leave the high school and go to the tech, we now, as taxpayers in Wilmington, have to pay for that child again to go to the tech. So that's a double hit on the taxpayers. We need to figure out what is driving these numbers.
right, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Yep,
off.
go ahead.
No, right, and I do understand that, and I wish it were as I'm not sure if linear is the right word, but around from a fiscal standpoint, being able to sort of take, it's a hypothetical, I know theoretical, but the monies that are traveling with that student from the town and make that that sort of spot reduction, if you will, at the high school, and I wish it were that straightforward. Of course, it's not. It's more complicated. But I am fully aware of that there's multiple costs or impacts on the town, on the taxpayers here, that only makes it more dire.
Are there any benefits to having smaller classroom sizes that are objective and measurable? It seems like, I know that it's expensive to lose students and maintain the same operations, but it seems like that could also be leveraged into some kind of positive for the students that remain.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the question of what's the ideal class size is often one that's discussed, and sometimes it's not started with a financial, consideration, but rather from a pedagogical, what's best for a child and their learning. It's one that's discussed openly and researched as well a lot too. I think that the idea, look at it as once myself a classroom teacher, the smaller classroom, the better to be able to interact with and support the students before me. That said, I think that we also have to be balancing where our ratios stand, what our contractual commitments, where they stand, and trying to best shape our planning around that. In some, there's absolutely, when you take a look at some of this data, as I have, we you know, at the high school level in particular, the ebbs and flows are there based upon student interest. That, you know, the profile of this year, if we kept the same exact number of students next year, could look different based upon their course selections. But I think that we have room here for an adjustment to push those numbers up a little bit. Is 20 at the high school in a class provide any greater advantages than, say, 25? I mean, I think that there are those that might argue that
Small.
in terms of, you know, in terms of the research. High quality teaching will always make the most direct impact and benefits. But I understand that, you know, their goal and the hope would be the smaller the better. But I look at that truthfully across the whole system as there has to be, and that's where I think class size average, not sort of the averages, but the pupil teacher ratio is helpful because it provides us the ability to try and shape an equitable level of service delivery across the school system, keep the overall budget at bay. Look at the end of the day, the more in check I believe we can keep our budget allows two things. One, a budget that the town and the taxpayers can support, and two, when there are needs to be met in some other realm or avenue, there's the whole capacity there to be able to, you know, to pursue those. Just directing money towards, you know, classroom teachers is obviously important, but again, we have to adjust to the fluctuations, and I'm recognizing that we need to make some adjustments and pick up for some lost time, as you pointed out.
The finance committee a few years ago back was invited to the tech for a walkthrough,
Okay.
and it was a wonderful experience because we actually got to go into the room where they teach, you know, dental assistant
Sure. Yeah.
work and so on and so forth. And one thing that impressed me greatly was they have an engineering class over there, and I believe they were getting into robotics.
Mhm.
That's something that even today, now this has been a number of years, even today I think about that, and if you have a child who is mathematically inclined and wants to be more of a hands-on person as opposed to a math student, that would be a very enticing program to be in. And obviously, I mean, in your documentation, you've noted that we haven't really taken a good look at the curriculum and the offerings since 2007, I believe it was, around that time.
Yeah, yes.
We can't be flip-flopping and going by whim, but when you look at something like engineering, that is something that, you know, there's so many options there, and it's something that, you know, a lot of kids might be interested in, and maybe the high school is not offering anything like that.
Right.
One thing that Sheen Tech, in my experience, has always done very, very well at is looking at what are the jobs out there, and what are we offering these students, and so that they can have a job when they leave. Well, at the high school, we're trying to get them into college, most of them, and so we want them on a college path. But not everybody is going to be college material, and not everybody is going to be well suited to the tech. So maybe that's some kind of crossover there that we need to consider seriously, upgrading some of those offerings.
Because I think music theory is not cutting it there. 3 kids in that classroom.
I know it was, you know, about 20 years ago when I was, you know, graduating. It was a lot of kids who went to the high school would go on to college, and a lot of kids went to the tech, would you go into the workforce? And that was kind of how things work. Do we have any idea of how that excuse me, how that breaks out now? Do we talk to the tech and find out, the Wilmington residents who go there, are they going to college, or what are they doing after compared to what the high school's doing? Like, are the ratios different?
There's a lot of the tech that still continue on to the college.
Right, I know they do
They-
now, yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they seem to have shifted
Right.
for how they do it, and I don't know, how are we comparing to that now with, what are kids doing next? What's the next step?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the numbers with it. Shashin may be undoubtedly perhaps tracking for that. I do know that they have, at least from what I understand, they have, I won't say shifting their focus, but expanding, I guess, the college preparatory track as well for students there, which for those that wish to go on. I'm sure that we do, I just don't know it, but I certainly can follow up in terms of what our, say 5 or 10 year rate for college, the college track, if you will, is. It's certainly some information I could gather and provide for you. But I think that notion is just mentioned here to me, the distinction, the Wilmington High School should indeed be, an institution where, largely speaking, we're aiming at supporting students who are on the path towards college or college readiness, but also career readiness. And again, and well, we can't, I don't think, expand our programming to be on a smaller scale. A tech school itself, certainly, and robotics is an example, and there could be many others, that we would be wise to bring online and to consider to explore. And that's at that heart of, before sort of making some staffing adjustments or alignments, let's just make sure we've got, the right number of staffing, let's say, in the science department, so that if there are expansion opportunities there, we're right sized for that. But I agree that I think there's some exciting programs, and it's not to say that we don't offer that right now in the high school, but it's always good to look outwards to see how we sort of size up and where there's opportunities for growth, or for where there's courses that are just continuously undersubscribed, and it might be time to phase those out and just not offer those.
On the robotics side, we do have a robotics club, very, very well attended and so forth. A couple of years back, we got a Cummings grant that helped us start that program. So one of our science teachers runs that, and the kids love it. But I think that's part of what Glenn tried to talk about at the high school level. We need to, maybe we need to offer this course, this type of course versus what we currently are doing. We have to kind of adjust.
So I was going to say, so Teresa, you mentioned a plan, and I don't, my thought is, we can't really formulate a plan unless we know the problem. And we're going a little bit to curriculum right now. And so I'm just wondering if it's possible for us to have some sort of a more formal survey, so we can get, and you need to have a trend, right? It can't just be 1 year, because if you look at the survival rate, I think it was, sorry, I need my glasses, but the survival rate's the lowest in the 9th grade, 52% over the last, whatever you see, typically straddles in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
And so, is that something that could be part of the plan? Is, we really need a more formal way of understanding why people, where are they going? Is it just demographics? Is it private school? Is it Shashin? I took some other notes. Homeschooling, I know that was something that picked up.
Yes,
right?
that's right. That's right.
During COVID, are they
Yes.
moving out of town? And then that's the where. And so if you think about the why, is it curriculum? Is it the teacher-student, student-teacher ratios? Those kinds of things, if we get some sort of a formal survey where we can start to pile that on year to year and really get a trend, that should inform the plan longer term, I think, as a program. So, Mike, I guess my question is that something that you could or think about implementing so we can get better information, or is that part of your?
It
goals?
is, yes, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear with that, but yes, that is part of trying, and obviously it's a snapshot for this cohort, this year, this group, but I wish we had it a little more
Right,
historically,
exactly.
but but it is an exit interview, and I think that we are, with what we are seeing right now, if we're to, and hopefully it's not the case, but if we are to see a trend outwardly continue, I mean, our numbers historically certainly have been pretty significant in terms of those that, you know, have moved on, and there's been some fluctuations for sure. I suppose we should assume to a degree that we're still going to see, you know, a fairly healthy number of students pursuing other options. But I don't think we should stop and just do this as a one-shot sort of deal this year, because I think we should be on top of trying to best understand what it is that's, you know, is a catalyst for families to pursue somewhere else. If there's something we can learn from it, if there's, you know, then that's going to be worthwhile all day, every day, you know, for us to be planning ahead.
Now, going off of that, I know this might be way too big of an undertaking, but it seems like Shawshan's sort of our biggest concern here. Is there any ability to work with the district to sort of see what the classes that the Wilmington residents that go there have been taken over, you know, a 3-year period? And if we do say everyone's going to robotics or everyone's going to like CAD design or something like that, it could, you know, in a shorter, short-term sense, inform where we might want to go and get some, make some short-term decisions before we sort of have a long-term trajectory.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if they track, but we can explore that to find out if they're tracking sort of residents by program.
It might be way too big of an undertaking,
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure.
I think it's
maybe
worth
not.
asking. I
Yeah.
think that'd be a very good source of information for us.
So the biggest jump was obviously last year with the 52% of students left 8th grade going to the high school. Do we have any idea? I think from memory, Wilmington was one of the latest schools to get back to in-person learning for the 2020-21 school year. I think a number of the surrounding towns got back before us. Do we think that could contribute? Was that a contributing factor? Do we have any idea? And do we think any of these kids will come back? Like, I know when we get them in the high school, we kind of retain them, but do we think they're all gone for the most part, at least, once they get settled
And this
into
has
whatever,
been
like
a
the tech or
trend.
something?
It's just not last year, this has been an ongoing trend.
Right, but there's a big spike. What I'm
Right.
saying, you know, it was, you know, in the 20s to mid-30s, and all of a sudden it jumped up to 52%.
Yeah.
And you know, is it a COVID thing where that's driving, where we were doing remote learning and?
Yeah, I don't know. I think what is true is Shawshan, I know this for a fact, got back. They were, and as Dr. Jackson said, you know, the reality for them is that for most of their programs, remote really wasn't an option.
Yeah.
Not all, but most. And so that was, as he shared with me, a fairly driving force that I believe made them one of the leading districts around to come back fully in person. So whether that was a fact, it's hard to know for sure. You know, there's smaller numbers, but the homeschool, as you mentioned, you know, that was a significant uptick last year, as I understand the data. I don't from Wilmington, but on a state level, my understanding is private school enrollment has gone up considerably as well too. So those students, gosh, I forget the number across the state. I think it was something in the neighborhood of 300,000 statewide, something like that. Hundreds of thousands anyway. Went somewhere else. They left and they did not go somewhere else. So you know, it is some, you know. So how much this plays into COVID? There undoubtedly is some level of correlation there. So all of which, to the degree we can try and gather that. I have thought of reaching out to those that already went last year as well too. I mean, I mentioned Dr. Quirk reached out. It's not lost upon me about that possibility. Doesn't mean that people will respond. But
I know,
maybe
but we
worth a try.
need a starting point, and
Right.
we need a game plan sooner rather than later at this point.
And it sounds like we mentioned earlier that we all agree there's probably multiple reasons why this is happening. I agree with you about during COVID. I think a lot of parents wanted their kids in school for different reasons, and they may have left because of that. And I don't know if many of them could have gotten into the tech, because that pretty much closes off after a certain point, and that's it. But I know some people who did move their children to private school, which is a big jump financially and in so many other ways. But in my gut, it's telling me that this was all starting at the middle school.
Yes.
And I was talking to, and this is just one family I was talking to, and the mom told me that her child does not want to go to high school. Great student, good athlete, popular kid, great kid. I said, why wouldn't he want to go to high school? Beautiful there, you know, everything's great, great teams, everything. And she goes, well, you know, one kid decides they're going somewhere, and then they start talking about it. And all of a sudden, nobody wants to go to high school. And they all want to go to a private school. And that kind of starts a lot of the conversations at home, I'm guessing. The mom that I was speaking to is working very hard to dissuade that conversation, that she doesn't want to, and doesn't feel the need to leave town. But I feel like a lot of this is coming from the middle school, and maybe that needs a really close look. What's going on there? You know, it's always been kind of, I refer to the middle school kind of like as a washing machine. You put your kids in the 6th grade, run them through the cycle, they come out different. There's so much that happens in those 3 years.
Indeed, there is.
It's a really tough time to be a kid. And it's probably very, very difficult to be a kid now. So I think that's just like, it's a lot more going, and that's why we segregate that age group. They're not mature enough to be with the high schoolers, and they're too mixed up to be with the younger kids. I just feel like there's something going on there that's contributing a lot towards this. I could be wrong, but that's my gut feeling. And I think all these other things that we've talked about are very important as well.
I don't think it's the main issue, but I've heard from a number of parents who I've talked to about this, that bullying and the consequences for it are an issue at the middle school. And you know, I don't think it's the whole cause. I don't know how much of a factor it is, but I know a lot of them feel lost, kind of like, you know, they'll make a complaint, or they feel like they made a complaint and nothing will get done, and they'll still see the kid every day, and they get to high school and they say, okay, this is the time, make a break. We're going to go somewhere else to get out. And you know, it's sad to feel, you know, a kid feels that helpless, that they have to leave to go to a different school. But I've heard from a couple of parents that is an issue that's going on, and there's not the right consequences for the kids who are doing the bullying. They feel like it's, you know, a very free pass that they get away with. I can't say that is true or not, but that's what I do hear.
And that might come back to the point of there hasn't been real leadership in the middle school. It's been up and down.
Right,
Because
yeah.
of staffing issues too.
I wonder, are the towns, Burlington seeing this? Is Woburn seeing this? I mean, you know, what about the towns around us? Are they seeing the same dynamic? Right? Because bullying happens at Wilmington, it happens
Yeah,
at Woburn,
you
it
can't
happens at
eliminate
Belgrade,
it. It's
right?
always
I mean,
going to be there.
I'm not saying I like it or I condone it. I'm just saying it is part of it. But are we different? I don't know if we're different. Are they those towns seeing the same sort of survival rate decreased from 8 to 9 that we're seeing?
Only based upon a view of the tech numbers, which are all also very public. So it's you know, I believe that they report out at this point in time anyway, fairly regularly with the school committee there on the application numbers. The numbers that I've seen show that we're talking about sort of some consistency and trend data here. I see the same thing with, I mean, again, I guess there's nothing secret about it, but Burlington and Bedford are the two school systems that send single digits.
Very few, yeah.
And it looks like, I don't know exactly how far back that is, but that's been at least for a few years. Whereas the other districts like ourselves, it bops around a little bit, but it's more consistent. So
But the other thing too is Bill Ricker, with their new high school, they now do 8
they
through
did,
12.
yeah. And that I think that's 3 years ago, maybe off by a year. My understanding, I can share that, I can gather the data if you'd like, but The first year, that reduced the total number of applicants, as I understand it, to Shawshene. Whether it was the new building or whether it was the combination of the building and the 8th grade inclusion of the building. That's swung back though, with those numbers now from what's looking like, at least from applications. I don't want to talk about the actual numbers for next year we're going to go, but it looks like they're back into the range that they have been over the last sort of 3 to 5 years or 4 or 5 years. So there's, if not for anything else, there looks like there's some stability or consistency, not stability, consistency with the 3 districts sending. I don't know about the other, factors of private school or that, or what that would look like. I'm not sure, but out of interest, it's not too difficult to find because the enrollment data is public through the Department of Education. So take a little look around for that if that's some information you'd be interested in seeing.
The retirees, I asked Jeff on the municipal side to do, which I haven't seen yet, but do you look at your entire employee roster and say, okay, we have a possibility of losing, 10 people to retiring this year, 15 the next year, anything like that, to plan ahead?
No, not really. So our contracts call for people that want to retire to notify us by December 1st. So that's kind of how we plan. Now there have been occasions where and then they can rescind that by March 1st.
Okay.
So we had a couple of occasions where someone told us they were going to retire, and the December 1st date allows them to get some payout of accrued sick time and a couple other things. But then I think March 1st they can rescind it. So we've had a couple occasions the past year, 2 or 3 teachers had told us they were going to retire, and then in March rescinded it. So it's a little bit difficult to. I mean, yeah, we do scattergrams and stuff, and kind of the ages of people, but you don't always know how many years have been in education.
Yeah.
We do that, see how many have been here, and so forth. But we try to, if we know of a retirement, we try to factor it into our budget. I think the documents we've shown you guys, there's a notation retirement on that. So it's people that, a couple of years back, we had a lot of retirees. Last year, we didn't have as many. We had a couple that rescinded. And then this year, we have a couple that have notified us so far. Now, the other thing, some people won't notify us until later on if they haven't been here. You have to be here so many years to have that benefit.
Okay.
So if you're here 5 years, you don't get that benefit. I think you have to be here 15 years. So if you're here for 15 years, notify us by December 1st and you get something. So people that can get that benefit could wait till April if they wanted to, or just tell us any time.
Do we have any teachers leaving voluntarily to go to another town, particularly in the younger grades?
We have, we do, and that's not necessarily atypical and happens annually, I would say, for different reasons. Sometimes it's, family and an opportunity closer to maybe where they reside. Sometimes it may be for compensation. Sometimes it may be for, an increase in responsibility, a leadership position, for example. The one thing that has been different this year, however, though, is the volatility of the staffing, which is not just something we're experiencing. Our director of human resources has close ties with counterparts all over, and they're experiencing the same thing. People who have decided to leave for other positions in other districts in the middle of the year. That does not happen usually. But it seems like with so many other things, sort of nothing is normal right now, and we have ourselves unfortunately lost a handful of staff after school started, and that is not typical, but it's happening everywhere, and we've So we've brought on people from other districts when we've had an opening, so it's terribly unfortunate, but it's part of the landscape right now that's happening.
And this is kind of getting away from the enrollment part, but where do we stand as far as salary ranges with our neighbors, our immediate neighbors? Obviously, like Burlington, I know is a very well-funded school system, so maybe we can't compete with Burlington, but what about the other towns around us? So Tewksbury's, Reading's, North Reading's.
So, as part of our negotiations, and I just tell you a piece of it, that we looked at that. So we do comparables. I think we looked at 29 communities. But what you can't look at is purely salary scale. For instance, Burlington's work year is 185 days. In Wilmington's work year is 182 days. There's a value to that. If the work day for Burlington's, I'm gonna make this up, 7 hours a day. If the work day, and this is all contractual, for Wilmington is 6 hours and 45 minutes a day. So there's a 15-minute difference per day. So you have 3 additional days in a community plus 15 minutes times 180 days. There's a hunk of additional time that another district may work compared to Wilmington. And there's a value to that. So we kind of we're working with that. It hasn't gone, it hasn't been received the greatest, but it's the only way you can do apples to apples.
Well, also,
Yeah.
you have maybe a different holiday schedule too.
Yeah, well, that one, it's really, the big thing is the number of days per year and the difference in time, because that adds up. I mean, they still have to go to, the kids have to go to school 180
Yeah.
days. Teachers don't get paid for holidays. But they might have to work, like I said, an extra 15 minutes a day times 180 days. You know, that's a lot of time, additional time. So if you kind of put it on an hourly rate, which isn't the best thing to do because all teachers work more than that, but the only way you can make the apples to apples, then you kind of compare, and that's what we're kind of doing it. So looking at pure salary schedule, it doesn't give you the true picture.
So are we still significantly lower? Because I think in the past we've had kind of the middle of the road kind of salary, entrance salary. Are we keeping up with our neighbors? I would not want to be the last school of choice if I were looking for a position. I wouldn't want, if, you know, let's face it, I get your point about the time and so on. But if you're just out of school and you're looking for a job, and one place is offering you $50,000, the next place is offering you $62,000, you're going to the $62,000. Even if you had to work a couple of days extra a year, you're just going to do that. I'm just wondering, are we keeping up with where we should be?
So the last time we negotiated, we actually, the teachers came in with they wanted 666 and so forth. And we went, you know, and that was another contract that they worked for a bit of time without a contract. But we worked with the town manager and so forth. And we looked really at the salary schedule at that time, and we agreed that they were on the lower end. So they actually got a 2 and a 1, so a 3-3-3. So they got 2 and a market adjustment for 1%. So they got 3%, 3%, 3%. So they brought them more in the middle and so forth. So that brought them through FY21. So now yes. So now we're negotiating. We're still negotiating. So they're kind of in the middle ground. When you factor in what I talked about, they're above the middle ground. But I hear you. If you just look at that piece, and we looked at benefits too. I mean, but it's hard to go down that road with them. But if we look at benefits, the town's very generous. You know, the 75-25% split plus it's difficult to analyze or make that apples to apples because every health insurance is a little bit different, different co-pays and so forth. We just look at the town's portion of health insurance and you compare that town to town to town to town. And if you factor that into salary, it's a different picture.
Total compensation.
Yeah,
right?
total
Yes.
good, try to
Right.
look at that, but, you know, again, that's kind of, it's difficult for a lot of intended staff.
Yeah, but I think that's an excellent point, you know, to be able to support your bargaining efforts, is that, you know, if we were more generous on some items, that does carry a value. All right, thank you.
To that point, we've been extending offers to fill some of these vacant positions and having them be turned down to go to higher paid schools or anything like that, because I'd love to see if everyone that we try to hire is going to Burlington.
Yeah, no, fair question. We asked the same, and sometimes yes, but not always.
Okay.
And that's why I say, you know, there's certainly different circumstances. You would think that, but actually that's not always the case. And in fact, I can tell you, I think it was about a month ago, we hired an individual from what we know was a higher paying district, but they came here and there was an adjustment in pay, but that was a good fit for them and so on. So sometimes it works both ways. We are still struggling though to fill positions, as unfortunately there's, you know, you may be seeing and hearing those headlines, but that's true here too, unfortunately. There's some key positions that we have, for all of our efforts, are just, we're not fully staffed, also not the norm. And never at this time of the year, but there's, it's a real struggle for some key positions. Again, not just for Wilmington, but I can tell you probably for every district we touch and beyond.
Are the current teacher positions open right now?
Not teacher positions. Psychologist, for example, is one where I think we have a couple right now. From what I understand, many districts are struggling. There's just not those that are interested in maybe doing that work right now, or being pulled in so many different directions for the current challenges. For teachers, though, no, we have some long-term substitutes, but that's not atypical. We have sometimes people who are on maternity leave or in sick leave, you know, so that's so we've been able to hold our own there. Substitute teachers has been more difficult than normal to fill. Also, again, something that's seemingly everywhere. We're trying to be innovative and creative. We're hopeful that we'll have some more college students come back, which they often do, to help out, but that's been a strain as well for us this year.
Are you down to education assistants?
I think a couple.
That's one area we struggle a little bit for educational assistance. And one of the thoughts there is not necessarily another school district, but the pay is not the greatest for educational assistants, and they work hard. I mean, you know, that's a tough job.
Right.
We've heard that a little bit, but you know, not necessarily going to another district and saying, you know, I'm not going to work for whatever the pay is and so forth. So we're down a couple. I don't know how many. We're down a few educational assistants. Yeah.
I saw the presentation, it was last week in the school committee with Christine Murray and the social emotional well-being staff.
Yes.
So I don't know the exact number, but it sounded like the evaluation numbers like doubled basically in this past year. And you have the 2 new aides that you hired with the grant money, right?
Yes.
So were they able to handle all the evaluations? Or if they can't, do we like have to hire an outside company to do it? Like how does that work?
So I think what you're referring to is the family engagement, social emotional engagement specialists. They don't evaluate. They're actually
Okay.
Their roles are not involved in the special education evaluations, which is what I think you're referring to.
Okay.
They have been a huge help though for families in crisis and students in crisis. So thank goodness we've had them, to be very honest. There's been a lot of, as was profiled in that, there's been a lot of things. Those evaluations, psychologists come into play there. So we're keeping pace right now, although, as I said, we're short, but there is great worry that if we can't fill some of those positions, the backlog will increase. So that falls largely on our special ed department. But yeah, those numbers are very concerning. They're high, along with the other crises that have been dealt with outside of the realm of special education too. It's a trying time.
And did I understand correctly that any Wilmington residents who go to like a school, like the tech or a private school or something like that, does Wilmington do the, like the
We
eval
are
on them?
obligated,
Yes.
the local district is
Yeah.
obligated
Okay.
to do so, yes, yeah. That's, and just to clarify for those that might be watching, it's not just a Wilmington agreement, but that's a requirement by civil law.
Okay.
And you have the two social emotional learning, those
Yes.
are hired, right?
Correct, yep.
And what are their credentials? Are they licensed social workers?
One is, for sure, I can tell you, I think actually maybe both
Yeah, I
are.
think they both,
Uh,
one has a different license as well, I'm not sure, but,
Questions? I just want to recognize the people from the school community. Do you guys have any comments or questions, or? No?
You know, if you gotta open up that to me, I'm always gonna take that up. What did that do? I just wanna say, that I'm the longest serving member right now, currently on our board. And in the 10 years that I've sat, education has done a 360 from what I've known and from what I've recognized, that this is a whole new venture. I do recognize the comments, and I do validate a lot of the concerns because they're often shared with us as a board as well with regards to the same reason and the financial stability, and that conversation has been had at our meetings and at the table consistently over the past couple of years. Do want to recognize that you've been a part of, we have gone through a lot of transitions over the past 6 years, especially with leadership. I personally find that we have now reached a stability now, and it is time that we do have to review. I know it may not be timely enough to respond to the data that you guys are searching for and that you need in order to make an educated decision for taxpayers. Students are always worth the investment. New schools, always worth the investment. Teachers can't teach to the best of their ability in a structure similar to Wildwood. And we can consolidate that because transitions are another data target that we look at for the success of students between those transitions of grades in multiple schools. It is always an investment. It's an investment in the community, not just our children, but they're the ones who benefit especially. Do want to let you know, similar to when the high school did open up, our numbers to retain students going to the high school did bump up. I think we had 96 over the previous year. Yes, since then, things, and I like to think that there's many aspects that need to be recognized. One aspect is the leadership and the stability. I think nothing can run, whether it be a school district, a town municipality, without stability and consistency of the leadership involved. And we've had our rocky roads in a transition, and that I think was part of it. But I do have to say, in the past 2 years with what the pandemic has brought and what the responsibilities and roles that superintendents have now, and well, I should say administrative teams, because it's not just our district, have found themselves, it's a whole nother monster. I do think that was a large piece of the contributing factor because, as you know, private schools don't operate like under the same rules and regulations as public schools do. So they don't have to answer necessarily to the commissioner of the Department of Education and Secondary Education like public schools do. I do want to comment with Shawsheen, they do have excellent programming, and I think they have a more diverse program. They don't fall under Proposition 2.5, as you know. So I think them giving students multiple opportunities, whether you want to go seek a trade, if that's the right path, or if you want to go to college, they offer that. We offer, and I think expanding and touching upon what Teresa, you stated upon about the life skill piece for those who don't want to go to military. If you look at our numbers though, our dropout rates, any dropout rate, if we're not at zero, then we still have work to do. But maybe over the past year, and please correct me, Dr. Brand, if I'm wrong, our dropout rates haven't been extremely significant like our urban colleagues and other areas. The biggest ones that you'll see dropping out are those kids who are most at risk and most at need, and who face educational challenges. I am terrified in listening to hear Shelley Newhouse speak about our COVID rates in this community. I'm terrified because remote learning is not an optimal way to deliver education to any student. And that's why you've seen the increase in homeschooling. Social emotional is a huge piece. across the nation, and I know you've all seen it on the news, we have, within every school community across the Commonwealth in this nation, we have outbreaks of dysregulation amongst kids, the fighting in Lawrence, the school shootings that we also have to be mindful of, as well as trying to navigate a pandemic, deliver education in a pandemic, which is a public health crisis. It's keeping our kids safe, but not only from school shootings and mental health that existed prior to the pandemic, but now we have more of a catalyst, so to speak. So how I'm seeing education and the operations and the evolution to deliver what we are expected to deliver and to do so, that the challenges they've only tripled. And in my opinion, as an observer on the board that I sit on and seeing the details and speaking to my other colleagues, and I just appreciate the time for listening to my comments, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
No problem, thank you. Joe, Jen? No?
Sure. I just want to say on behalf of the school committee, thank you for your time and your continued support. Thank you for these questions. These are certainly questions that we've all been talking about for at least the past year or before that. Obviously, COVID sort of put a little bit of a stop or a halt, as we were dealing with some more pressing issues. But we do appreciate your time and kind of this continuing pushing us to make the right decisions for the students in Wilmington. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The only thing I had left on here was the upcoming budget. And obviously you've already got a good start on that. And hopefully this discussion tonight will have some impact on the budget we're going to be proposing. And we'll take it from there. I do want to thank you. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to revisit this issue during the budget meeting. Obviously, not to this extent. I think it's great that we've been able to bring up some of the thoughts that the Finance Committee has been having. Sure. Now you know them. And, maybe you could, come back to us in March and be able to give us a greater degree of comfort that we're getting somewhere and we're figuring things out. So if that's all right.
No, that's fine.
And to piggyback off her comment, according to the timeline that you put in here, it looks like that you'll have a lot of decisions by the time you come back to us for the budget.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have recommendations from the high school and.
Indeed.
Okay.
Unless something falls apart with.
The wheels fall off the bus.
Right.
Don't even say
Yeah.
that.
This is work that's paramount right now for us.
Anyone on the committee have any other questions or comments?
I don't really want to get too far into this. The MSBA and how things are going with that, and just looking at the numbers, I don't think this is the right solution here. But has it been discussed? Bumping 8th grade into the high school, along with consolidating or moving things around. I mean, if you look at the projected numbers of 2027, 8th grade fits in the high school with our numbers. So has that been discussed?
Not formally.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that, no, I shouldn't, not informally. But I appreciate the question and I understand it. I think right now, we applied for that grant program, the MSBA, as right as the pandemic was breaking out, and for a number of different reasons, and that was a gamble. There was no assuredness we were going to get in, and here we are. One of the things that is important now that we're in the program is that really things need to be left largely. My understanding is things really need to be left largely intact. That is to say, in other words, unless there was a catastrophe that needed to lead to the building closing, the building that's in the grant program, the MSBA expects that they're going to be able to partner with the district and analyze things where they're at to make longer term determinations. So I guess that's a way to say for right now, I think it's in our community's best interest to sort of stay put, so to speak. But quite frankly, depending on how this all plays out, it is something that perhaps could be considered, as was mentioned earlier. Now they built a building for it. I think there'd be a lot of things to consider, truthfully, in terms of how that could work.
Right,
But,
that's a lot of moving parts.
from a body count or student count, but, I think that we'd have to be pretty thoughtful and size that up from every side. But I've had that thought. But where we're at right now, I think the idea of, if I'll just take the opportunity, the idea of school consolidation really, I think, makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, and I'm hopeful that the community will entertain that, not just from the standpoint of student transitions, but also fiscally. The number of schools, the number of facilities that the town currently operates, and with our population, the idea of dropping that building count, I think has a lot of merit for a lot of reasons, and so I was pleased to see that as part of the facilities master plan, and I'm hopeful that can be the story that is considered as we move forward, because I do think that would be it would have many benefits, I think, long term for the town of Wilmington, not just the school system, but fiscally for the town.
The study that we'll be funding at the special town meeting, will some of that questions be brought up in the study?
Oh, about the idea of consolidation?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. If we are able to engage in that study, that will analyze all of this. It'll analyze the possibilities. They will look at land availability to see if there's matches there for what we might do. So most definitely, that study will expand the landscape and look far beyond just taking the Wildwood and renovating it. It will look at
bulldozer would be easier.
and then perhaps you could have some land that you could sell.
But the special town meeting is, I believe, March 8th,
March 8th, yes.
and the public hearing is going to be, I think, February 15th. So it won't interfere with school vacation. So I'm doing that. Anyone have anything else? Thank you.
I have one more thing. Can I
Sure,
mention
Paul.
it? In your packet, there was or in the memo, we explained the staffing tied with the grants. Just want to make so you understand, it was written in, I think, last sentence, but we included in the grants any potential health insurance impact the town may have. So we're cognizant of it. So we hired those positions, which are completely grant funded. They go away when the grants go away, unless something comes up that we need to hold the positions. But for this, we did include in those grants potential town portion health insurance. So I just want you to be aware that we're cognizant of the taxpayers.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Anything else?
No, I'd just like to say thank you
I was gonna
for
say that.
all the information. It helps us to understand what's going on, and hopefully, we can make some changes here. And I would hope that when you go in March, that if this is questioned, because it's a very good chance that somebody's going to stand up and say, you want a new building, but your high school, which is brand new, basically, is only filled 2/3. So it's important that the schools will be able to stand up and say, yes, we're aware of that, and we are working and we have things in motion to address that. So that hopefully you will be successful in that March meeting. So we're actually doing you a favor.
But Glenn and Paul, thank you. Thank you for all your time.
Thank you.
The information forward to the committee.
It's not lost upon me or us that we are obviously a huge aspect as an organization of the town, and fiscally, your jobs are clearly important, and we recognize that. And I also understand our organization, our little institution is complex, and there's a lot of moving parts, and hopefully, if not for anything else, tonight's also giving you a little more insight in terms of some of the things that we're trying to grapple with, and not make excuses for, but just trying to be thoughtful about as we take a long-term view. So Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem, thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your night.
Good night.
Take care. I don't think we have anything else for this meeting.
Minutes?
Oh, the minutes.
The October minutes, right?
October minutes. Everyone read the October minutes?
I wasn't here for
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of October 26th as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion. Seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry?
I said, didn't we have 2 minutes to do?